fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, oh, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck.
Cultural appropriation happens when a dominant culture takes things from another culture that is experiencing oppression. I know, it's pretty technical sounding, so let me break it down. A dominant culture is the most visible and accepted culture within a particular society. Oppression describes repeated and prolonged discrimination. It's something that's carried out through powerful organizations such as courts, the armed forces, and schools. And it's not just one-on-one behavior, but it's a form of structural discrimination, meaning it's backed by powerful authorities. Racism, homophobia, and sexism are all forms of oppression. But here's what cultural appropriation isn't. It isn't cultural exchange. See, this is different from cultural appropriation. Things such as tea, gunpowder, and pasta have been shared between different cultures throughout history. These borrowings are not the same as cultural appropriation because they don't involve power. When different cultures come together on an equal footing, exchange happens. But when dominant groups take from an oppressed group, we're dealing with appropriation. Cultural exchange is also very different from assimilation. Assimilation describes what happens when minority cultures are forced to adopt features from a dominant culture in order to fit in. This is different from appropriation because it's done to ensure survival and to avoid discrimination. For example, at certain jobs or schools, Black women's hairstyles are discriminated against, being deemed unprofessional or distracting. And the reason why cultural appropriation is a problem is because it continues the oppression of the non-dominant culture. When we look at a culture that's experiencing oppression, it's often a result of colonization, where a dominant group has claimed ownership of the land and its people. When the dominant group continues to steal aspects of the non-dominant culture, it continues the economic oppression and disadvantage of that culture. In Australia, there are cases where white Australian businesses have stolen Aboriginal artworks for use on t-shirts and souvenirs. This allows the dominant culture to make money from the non-dominant culture without benefiting the original artist. Another thing it doesn't do is give people credit for their own culture. Cultural appropriation has a nasty habit of giving the dominant group credit for aspects of a culture they have taken, reinforcing the power imbalance between the two groups. For example, Kylie Jenner was credited with starting an edgy new hair trend, while Black actress Zendaya faced criticism for wearing her hair the same way. And what's interesting about this is that Zendaya's natural hair was seen as a negative, but Kylie Jenner, a person with no ties to Black culture, was given credit for taking something that wasn't hers. It also creates stereotypes. Cultural appropriation often adds to the stereotypes faced by non-dominant cultures. The Native American chief, the Japanese geisha, or the Arab sheik can be examples of stereotypes that pop up during Halloween. When people from dominant cultures dress up like this, it reduces something of a cultural significance to just a costume, so that the dominant group can have a bit of fun. See, it keeps these kinds of stereotypes going, and when cultures have been oppressed, stereotypes often add to their negative experiences. Here are multiple examples of times we've seen cultural appropriation in the media. And yes, the debate over cultural appropriation has been around for decades. Black writers and artists from the Harlem Renaissance voiced their concerns about the distortion of African cultures in some of the modernist artworks, and wrote at length about the demeaning caricatures of Black identity in minstrel shows. Cherry-picking cultural elements, whether dance moves or print designs, without engaging with their creators for the cultures that gave rise to them, not only creates the potential for misappropriation, it also misses an opportunity for art to perpetuate real-world changing progress. And the rise of social media has significantly contributed to the public outcry against what some people see as the exploitation of cultures that historically have been marginalized. And what I personally have to say about this is, I know there will still be people who totally disagree and will respond with the argument that all things were created by other people of different races or cultures. And yes, that is true, but that's not exactly the logic behind the term cultural appropriation. If that was the case, we wouldn't be able to use anything, right? Everything was created by someone. However, there is a difference between inventions and tradition. Inventions are things created for the use of all humans to help us in surviving and things of that nature, while traditions are things that have been passed down through generations, beliefs and customs that help us to form and identify who we are. I also think that it's important to understand what culture is and what it means. Culture is the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. And it's the attitudes and behavior characteristics of a particular social group. For example, black hair has been the point of much attention, controversy, discrimination, admiration, and envy. Black people have chosen hairstyles for the purposes of protection, functionality, expression, and style. When a white person has dreadlocks, think about whether or not it holds the same cultural significance or functional necessity. Think about whether or not that honors black culture or likely contributes to harmful cultural misappropriation. Defenses down. Please just truly think about it. But above all, the biggest concern that I myself and other people have is the lack of acknowledgement from other races when it comes to black social issues. It's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be white with privilege and be black without the struggle. Here are some celebs who broke that part down the best. Nicki Minaj said, "Come on, you can't want the good without the bad. If you want to enjoy our culture and our lifestyle, bond with us, dance with us, have fun with us, twerk with us, rap with us, then you should also want to know what affects us, what is bothering us, what we feel is unfair to us. You shouldn't not want to know that." Macklemore said, "We want to dress like, walk like, talk like, dance like, yet we just stand by. We take all we want from black culture, but will we show up for black lives?" 4 years ago, Amanda Stenberg made a point when she said, "What would America be like if we loved black people as much as we loved black culture?" But another thing that continues to confuse me is how black people have always been depicted in such a negative way. Basically, everything associated with black people was deemed ghetto or ugly, or it was just simply underplayed. But now that black people are proving that narrative to be false, stepping into and being proud of their blackness, it seems like everybody wants to be black. Things that have been around are all of a sudden acceptable, trendy, and cute now that the dominant race is doing them. But it's nothing new to us because we've been doing them. Not to mention that the dominant race notions either involve attention or capitalization. Non-dominant motives are actually to embrace what we've created, to be in touch with who we are, to wear it proudly, because it's part of our legacy, our heritage, our DNA. So it definitely doesn't hold the same significance, and it probably never will. Plus, we've come a long way to be where we are today, and my culture is definitely like a badge of honor that I wear proudly. The day that I let someone else wear that badge will be the day that we all have the same status in being an American, and it will no longer be cultural appropriation, but it will be cultural exchange.